Have you ever stopped to think about how many players wore the Dodgers blue and white, gave everything they had to this franchise, and still never received the credit they deserved? Some were never on magazine covers. They never got the spotlight. But without them, the history of Los Angeles would be completely different. Today, we're going to dive deep into the Dodgers' past to bring back 10 names that time tried to erase, and that deserve far more recognition than they ever received. Stay until the end, because there's one name on this list that will truly surprise you: Ron Cey. If you grew up watching the Dodgers in the 70s, you certainly remember Ron Cey's signature stance at third base. The short arms, the compact frame, the perfect nickname, the Penguin. Cey played for the Los Angeles organization for 12 years and was one of the pillars of the famous 70s infield, alongside Garvey, Lopes, and Russell, a quartet that stayed together longer than any other in modern baseball history. But while Steve Garvey was landing magazine covers and appearing on TV shows, Cey quietly went about his business, hitting home runs, making solid plays at third base, and doing his part to bring home championships. In the 1981 World Series, he shared the MVP award with two other players, something extremely rare in fall classic history. The truth is that any Dodgers team in history would be weaker without Ron Cey, and very few fans today remember his name with the appreciation he deserves: Davey Lopes. Speaking of that legendary 70s infield, it would be a crime not to dedicate a special section to Davey Lopes. The Dodgers' second baseman from 1972 to 1981 was simply one of the best base stealers in the league, and he did it with astonishing consistency. During a stretch between 1975 and 1976, Lopes stole 38 consecutive bases without being caught, a record that stood for decades. But what makes Lopes even more special is how complete a player he was. He hit for power, played outstanding defense at second base, and had a baseball instinct that coaches loved. Off the field, he was known as a quiet leader, the kind of player his teammates deeply respected but the media rarely put in the spotlight. Lopes was selected to the All-Star game, but his name rarely comes up when people talk about the greatest Dodgers. It should come up much more often. Pedro Guerrero. Some players carry an entire team on their backs for a full season. Pedro Guerrero was one of them. Arriving from the Dominican Republic, the Dodgers outfielder and third baseman was a force of nature throughout the 1980s. Early in his career, he was a raw player with enormous talent who was still refining his game. Over time, he became one of the most feared hitters in the National League. The interesting thing about Guerrero's story is that he was involved in a trade that almost everyone considered a mistake by the Dodgers, and for a while, it seemed like the critics were right. But before he left, Guerrero left a deep mark on Los Angeles, including that magnificent performance in the 1981 World Series, where he was co-MVP alongside Cey and Ron Cey, a player who should occupy a much bigger place in the collective memory of the fans. Mike Marshall. This name may sound unfamiliar to some younger fans, but Mike Marshall was one of the most revolutionary relief pitchers in baseball history, and he built a large part of that legacy wearing a Dodgers uniform. In 1974, he became the first relief pitcher to win the Cy Young Award, and he did it in spectacular fashion, appearing in 106 games during the same season, another historic record. Marshall was different from everyone else. He used a completely unique pitching motion, based on years of his own biomechanical research, and rarely got injured because of it. He was stubborn, intellectual, and had absolutely no interest in being popular, which probably cost him a great deal in terms of recognition. But few pitchers have done as much for a team in a single season as he did for the Dodgers in '74. Bill Russell. Every infield needs a general. For the Dodgers of the 1970s, that general was Bill Russell. The Los Angeles shortstop was one of the most consistent and durable players in franchise history, wearing the blue uniform for nearly 2 decades. Russell wasn't the kind of player who hit a ton of home runs or stole the spotlight with spectacular plays, but he was absolutely reliable, intelligent, and possessed a baseball IQ that few players at his level could match. What many people don't know is that Russell faced serious personal challenges during his career, including financial difficulties after retirement and still never sought the spotlight. When Tommy Lasorda stepped down as manager in 1996, it was Russell who took over the team on an interim basis. A Dodger through and through, and someone who deserved much more than a footnote in franchise history. Orel Hershiser does receive some recognition, but he's still far from getting full credit for what he accomplished with the Dodgers. In 1988, he had one of the greatest pitching seasons of all time, culminating in 59 consecutive scoreless innings, a record that still hasn't been broken. And then, he practically won the World Series MVP by himself, carrying a team that, on paper, had no business beating the Oakland Athletics the way they did. What makes Hershiser especially underrated is that he achieved all of this while being a technically humble player, without the intimidating physique of a Randy Johnson or the aggressive attitude of a Roger Clemens. He was calculated, methodical, and relied on his mind as much as his arm. One of the brightest baseball minds ever to step onto a mound in Los Angeles. Steve Yeager. If you've never heard of Steve Yeager, you'll never fully understand how the Dodgers of the 70s and 80s managed to be so consistently successful. The catcher spent 15 years wearing Los Angeles colors, calling games for star pitchers and serving as the defensive anchor of a team loaded with offensive talent. Yeager nearly lost his life in 1976 when a broken bat shard struck his throat during a game. And afterward, he personally developed a throat protector for catchers that has since become standard equipment in baseball. A legacy that goes far beyond the diamond. To top it off, he was also co-MVP of the 1981 World Series, making him part of a historic trio, alongside Say and Guerrero. 3 co-MVPs in a single fall classic, something that had never happened before and will probably never happen again. Tommy Davis. Before Sandy Koufax, before Don Drysdale, there was a player named Tommy Davis who was simply the best hitter in baseball. In 1962, Davis led the National League in batting average and RBIs, yet still found himself overshadowed by the team's star pitchers. He was young, talented, and seemed destined for a Hall of Fame career. Then came 1965, a serious ankle fracture that completely changed the course of his baseball life. Davis never returned to being the explosive player he once was, but he remained in the league for another 11 years, adapting his game and showing a level of resilience that few could match. Tommy Davis's story is one of those that makes fans wonder, what if? A career shortened by injury, but brilliant enough to deserve a much larger place in the collective memory of Los Angeles fans. Wes Parker. The Dodgers of the 1960s were dominated by the arms of Koufax and Drysdale, but the man holding down first base was Wes Parker, and he did it with an elegance rarely seen at the position. Parker won 6 consecutive Gold Gloves, an extraordinary achievement that places him among the finest defensive first basemen in baseball history. What few people know is that Parker retired early, at age 32, simply because he felt baseball was consuming everything else he enjoyed in life. He willingly walked away from years of career earnings and opportunities, a decision that shocked the Dodgers organization. Later, he worked as an actor in Hollywood and appeared on several television programs, a fascinating figure and one of the most graceful defenders Los Angeles has ever seen. Eric Karros. For any fan who followed the Dodgers during the 1990s, Eric Karros was a constant presence, and yet it's incredible how often he's left off lists of the franchise's greatest players. The first baseman won the May Rookie of the Year award in 1992, and spent 11 years in Los Angeles serving as one of the offensive cornerstones of a team constantly trying to rebuild its greatness. Karros hit more than 270 home runs in a Dodgers uniform, placing him among the top 5 in franchise history in that category. But perhaps what defines Karros most is his loyalty to the organization, even during difficult years when the team wasn't competitive and he could have easily demanded a trade. When he finally left, he did so with his head held high, an old-school ball player in the best possible sense of the phrase. Looking at these 10 names together, one thing becomes very clear. The greatness of the Dodgers was never built by just 1 or 2 superstars. It was built in layers, by men who put the team above their egos, who wore that uniform with quiet pride, and who were often overshadowed by the brighter stars in the same clubhouse. From Ron Cey, with his unmistakable stance at third base, to Steve Yeager, who literally bled for the team and even changed baseball through his invention, to Eric Karros holding things together during the difficult years of the 1990s. Each of these players left a mark that time should never erase. And today, here, we made sure to remember them. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these names had the biggest impact on your childhood watching the Dodgers? Or is there a player on this list you never expected to see here? Leave a comment below. I love reading every response. And if you enjoyed this content, hit the like button on the video because it makes a huge difference for us. Be sure to subscribe to the channel as well, because there's a lot more Dodgers history coming your way, and you won't want to miss any of it. Let's go Dodgers!